there's a lot of misconception surrounding the vegetarian diet.
The most important part of becoming a vegetarian is having the correct information before you do so.
I'm excited about today's episode because about 3% of Americans are vegetarians, but what you don't know about being a vegetarian could actually hurt you. This is Spot On, a health and wellness podcast for college students, soon to be college students, or anyone that knows a college student. Spot On breaks through the latest health and wellness information hijacked from media headlines to provide you with accurate and usable information that is, well, spot on to meet your needs. I am your host, Dr. Joan Salge Blake. I am a nutrition professor at Boston University and the author of the college textbook called Nutrition in You, which is used in colleges across the United States and abroad. You know, vegetarian diets seem to be all you're hearing on social media and in mainstream media. So why don't you pour yourself some almond milk and let's go to the streets and see what Joe and Josephine on the streets feels about vegetarian diets.
I think a vegetarian diet is great if you're able to still balance what you eat and making sure you're getting all of your nutrients.
I feel like when you tell someone you're a vegetarian, like the first thing they say is like, oh, like how are you making sure you're getting enough protein if you're not eating any meat? But I think a lot of people just don't realize that it's actually fairly easy to get a lot of protein in your diet.
I think vegetarian diets are good for the body first and foremost. I know that I feel, and like I've heard other people have this experience, they just feel lighter, not as tired, not as heavy, like more capable.
I completely, totally respect and understand everyone who makes that choice, even though it's not one I would probably make for myself. I think it's a good way to live a healthy lifestyle by your own terms.
I feel like it's really hard for vegetarians to find like things that are only vegetarian, like when they go out to eat.
I typically eat meat because I use it as a source of protein, and I don't think that I would really get it any other way.
I feel like we are supposed to be carnivores, but I think it's people's own life decision.
A vegetarian diet is important for proper digestion and is good for the environment, and if you cook cauliflower well, it tastes pretty good.
I was a vegetarian for 7 years, and I think the most important part of becoming a vegetarian is having the correct information before you do so. I became anemic about 5 years in, but I do think that it's a really good diet if you know how to cook and you know what's important for your body.
So you want to be a vegetarian? Well, let's listen first and see the ins and outs of being a vegetarian. And, you know, I just want to tell you that before we start this episode, I introduce my fabulous guest here. You know, I always try to, like, get into the mood. So I just want to tell you that I just had lunch. It was a bean salad lunch. Hello. And in the studio, I have littered all over the studio these cracked roasted chickpea peppercorn snacks and everything. So everything is going vegetarian today. So the vegetarian's in my body, and I'm looking at it. So I'm feeling very plant-based right now. And with that said, I have the plant-based guru on the phone here from California. Her name is Sharon Palmer. She has a master's degree, and she's a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and she calls herself the Plant-Powered Dietitian, which I actually absolutely love. And let me tell you, this woman is very busy. She has authored over 950 articles in so many publications, such as Better Homes and Gardens, Prevention LA Times, on plant-based diets. Her book, The Plant-Powered Diet, The Lifelong Eating Plan for Achieving Optimal Health, Beginning Today. I love it. And she's got another rock star book coming out, or one that she put out in 2014, and I'm sure she has another one coming out because she's got always somebody coming out. She blogs daily to, get ready for this, 170,000 members who are listening to her words of wisdom. And so I'm so happy to welcome Sharon Palmer to Spot On. Hi, Sharon.
Hi. Hi, it's so great to be here.
Oh, so it's great to have you on the phone. I just want to know, if you have 170,000 followers, do you have to send birthday cards to them all?
No, I don't.
Oh,
but I try to engage with them and chat with them online as much as I can.
Okay, good, because I'm saying, my goodness gracious, I can't sleep then. All right, so we are going to talk about vegetarian diets, but you know something? I like what you call, you love the whole title of plant-based dietitian, but what is a plant-based diet versus a vegetarian diet?
Yeah, well, the true definition of a plant-based diet is a diet that focuses on plants. So that could be a lot of different diet styles. It could be even a Mediterranean diet, because a Mediterranean diet, we hear so much about the health benefits of that diet. Mm-hmm. It's mostly plants, and the major animal food in the Mediterranean diet is fish.
Right.
But it's a very plant-based diet. And then we have diets like vegetarian diets, which they exclude animal flesh, but they include things like dairy products and eggs, all the way to a vegan diet, which excludes all animal food. So you wouldn't even eat dairy products or eggs on that kind of diet. So It's kind of this range of diet patterns.
Right. And people often say, I could never do a vegetarian diet, but I'm like, do you like pizza? Do you like mac and cheese? Thank goodness peanut butter and jelly sandwiches came around in this world, because that's really why American children have survived. And when you look at all of that is all, vegetarian type meals. So really, probably a lot of the meals that you like in life are vegetarian. It's just that they're, and plant-based, as you just said, Sharon, which is the recommendations for the dietary guidelines. But you can also have certain types of vegetarians, and I want to go through some of those so you can explain those. So what is a vegan?
So a vegan is a diet pattern that excludes all animal foods altogether. So anything that's related to an animal, which would, of course, be things like meat and poultry and fish, but would also exclude things like dairy products like milk, cheese, cream, butter, and eggs. So it would be filled with only plant foods, things like whole grains, lentils, soy foods, fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds.
And beans, probably, right?
Yes,
okay.
Beans.
Right. So they could have these chickpeas that I'm looking at. Okay. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So then there's many varieties here. The next one is a lacto-vegetarian, or what does that mean? What does that mean?
So that would be a vegetarian that excludes animal flesh, like the red meat or the chicken and fish, but they would include things, milk. Lacto is milk. So that would be milk products, whether it's just drinking milk or cheese, sour cream, cottage cheese, anything that was made from milk products.
Okay, so that's when I have mac and cheese. I'm a lacto-vegetarian. Mm-hmm. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Oh, see, look at me, Sharon. And what about an ovo-vegetarian? What is that?
So the ovo stands for eggs.
Okay.
So that would be a vegetarian that they're excluding all animal foods, no dairy products as well, but they will have eggs.
Okay, so on Friday night when I have a vegetarian all-vegetable omelet, I'm an ovo-vegetarian.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, and then if a lacto-ovo-vegetarian would be what?
And that would be a vegetarian that doesn't want to eat any animal flesh, such as meat, poultry, or fish, but they're including things like dairy products, milk, cheese, that kind of thing, and eggs. And that's kind of the most common of the vegetarian diet patterns, is the lacto-ovo-vegetarian.
Okay, so that's the one where you can have eggs and dairy and vegetables and grains. So that means I have my omelet, my vegetable omelet, now I'm adding cheese to it.
Mm-hmm,
okay.
Exactly.
Okay, and then there's a pescatarian. Now, what the heck is a pescatarian?
Well, the pesca part of that word means fish. So that is a vegetarian that they don't have any other animal flesh except for fish. So they don't eat red meat, they don't eat poultry, but they will have fish. And then it's pretty much a vegetarian diet on top of that. So they'll also include eggs and cheese typically. But it's important to note that even all these diets we're talking about, people can have their own version of it. Like you'll find pescatarians that don't eat dairy products.
Right. Okay.
So they can have their own little tweak on it, but that's generally what it means.
Right. Okay. So when I'm having my tuna fish sandwich, I'm a pescatarian for that meal. Okay, there you go. And then the last one, which cracks me up when I was looking it up, it's called a semi-vegetarian. So, Sharon, what is a semi-vegetarian?
Yeah, this is actually a growing trend, and it's also called flexitarian. It's this eating pattern where you don't want to be called or pinned down to become a total vegetarian, but you're trying to really eat more and more plant-based meals. Like maybe some people, they're about 80% eating plant-based, and the other 20% is animal foods. It doesn't have to be an exact formula, but it's this idea where you're really eating almost a vegetarian diet, but you don't want to 100% say that you're a vegetarian.
So really, when you look at the My Plate, and we've talked about that before in other episodes, and we're going to put up a picture of the My Plate up on the Spot On Facebook page. That would be like a semi-vegetarian. And then I also have a picture of a vegetarian My Plate. I'm going to put them side by side because you're right, Sharon. There's a lot of similarities to it, and the My Plate wants you to have less meat and fish and poultry. And then the vegetarian plate that I'm going to show up, which is quite clever, just doesn't have any animal products going to it. It has like beans and fish and things like that. So we'll show them, but pretty much. So really, depending on the meal, depending on my mood, depending on the day, I could be all these wonderful vegetarians. And if I do that, what are the health benefits?
So there's quite a bit of research that shows that people that eat a more plant-based diet have lots of health benefits, mostly related to heart health, lower weight, a healthier weight range, and lower risk of diabetes, even certain types of cancer. So there are a lot of health benefits associated with eating this way.
And that's because it's so rich in the fruits and the vegetables and the whole grains, and less of the maybe saturated fat that may come from fatty meats and cheese and things like that?
That's exactly right. And what I like to point out is that sometimes it's really not about what you're not eating, but it's what you are eating. Right. Because you pointed out the My Plate, when you see that beautiful plate filled with fruits and vegetables and whole grains and beans, then it's just kind of an automatic that you can see that why there are benefits associated with eating that way.
I mean, surely. I mean, if the whole plate is full of fruits and vegetables, which are full of fiber and water, my goodness gracious, they fill you up before they fill you out. So, I could see how that could cut calories at your meal by loading up that plate with fruits and vegetables. Then if you add beans on top of it, then you have added more fiber to your diet. My goodness, you'll be stuffed before you get halfway through the meal. So which is great. Mm-hmm. Not all, what I was reading, not all plant-based diets can be healthy, though, right? Because you could have a plant-based diet or vegetarian diet that is all refined carbohydrates and maybe a lot of sugar, right?
That's exactly right, because when you think about it, sugary soda is plant-based.
Right.
Chips and French fries, all these things that are a little more extravagant and indulgent are often plant-based. So, it's important to really focus on the whole minimally processed plants, the ones we were just talking about, that plate full of whole grains and fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds and beans and lentils. Those are the ones that are associated with benefits.
Right. Because when you think about it, everything in the bakery is plant-based, right?
Right.
Exactly. Right. So people will say this all the time that I'm going to be more plant-based foods, but when you look at what they're eating, is what you had said before. If it's a lot of refined foods and processed foods, and everything, we've gotten away from the whole the part about the word vegetarian that makes it so healthy. So I think that's so important for all of us to understand that, because I know a lot of times here on college campus they'll say, I'm going to be a vegetarian. Okay, and I'll say to them, well, what does that mean? I'm going to eat rice and broccoli. And I'm like, okay, I like rice, I like broccoli. And even if you make that rice, brown rice and broccoli, that's not going to be a healthy diet, because you're not going to be able to make all those nutrients that you need. And tell us a little bit about that. What are some of the nutrients that you may fall short of if you're not doing a smart vegetarian diet?
Yeah, that's a very good point. If you eat a really smart, well-planned vegetarian diet, you should do pretty well with your nutrient needs. You can get, if you're eating a vegetarian, lacto-ovo-vegetarian, you get a lot of calcium from dairy products. You can get protein from eggs, cheese, beans, lentils, all those things. So the only thing you could be a little short on is B12, because even B12, if you're excluding all animal flesh in terms of meat, poultry, and seafood, you could be a little short. So the recommendation is to supplement with B12 a few times a week. And then if you're a total vegetarian, meaning you're vegan, then you would have to supplement every day with B12, because that's really found in animal products. And then, if you're doing a total vegetarian diet, a vegan diet, then you have to make sure you're balancing your plate, getting calcium sources, and getting a lot of whole grains, beans and lentils, green leafy vegetables, those kinds of things that are rich with all the minerals that you need.
Sharon, I am so glad that you said that about vitamin B12, that even if you're having cheese and dairy a couple times a week, you still should be having cheese and dairy in your diet. You should be still supplementing a couple times a week with vitamin B12, because it's only found in fortified foods and animal products. I'll tell you a sad story. I have a colleague who is a registered dietitian nutritionist. Now that we're talking, knows exactly ins and outs of nutrients. And, all along, she's a lacto-ovo vegetarian. She's doing her yogurt. She's doing some eggs every so often and everything. And about 10 years into it, she starts to get this tingling in her hands. And she thought, oh, my goodness, what is going on? What's going on? Well, long and short of it, she was getting deficient in vitamin B12, and that's used for your nerves transmission, to the point where it could be permanently problematic, that is, damage is done. So I'm so glad you said that, because she thought just by having yogurt and cheese she was getting enough B12, but she wasn't. And that's why it's so important, I think, that when you going to do this, and if you're going to go really full-fledged into this, you ought to sit down with a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and make sure that they plan it out, so you know that you're meeting all the needs. Or, like you said, you're going to be supplementing with certain nutrients so that you make sure you get everything you need.
I agree with you. Especially for a vegan diet, I always recommend that somebody sit down with a registered dietitian who is familiar with that, with those kind of eating patterns, and just make sure you're, planning out a nutritionally adequate diet. I mean, it's possible to eat a healthy diet, but, it takes a little bit of planning. And I see a lot of mistakes that people make. And one of them is they're not, they're just kind of eating what they feel like. And when you're eating a plant-based diet, you need to be more strategic and make sure you're covering your bases. So you're right about that.
Are you having trouble sleeping, focusing, or relaxing? If the answer is yes, then the TM Softs White Noise Sleep Sounds podcast has got you covered. This hour-long podcast is made to help you get rid of distractions, reduce stress, relax, and most importantly, get better sleep. You can listen to sounds of nature, white noise, relaxing music, and much, much more. You can check out the TM Softs White Noise Sleep Sounds podcast on Spotify or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast.
If you haven't heard about Anchor, let me tell you, it is the easiest way to make a podcast. Trust me, if I can do it on Anchor, anybody can do it on Anchor. Besides being easy, it's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit the podcast right from either your phone or your computer. And best of all, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you. And you can hear it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and many, many other platforms. So it is really like one-stop shopping, everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So really, if you're into this and you want to do this, Anchor is the place to go. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. So to talk about eating strategic, tell me about the protein. All right, so suppose you're not going to do the fish, or you're not going to do cheese or dairy every day, and so you're just going to do mostly, plant-based foods. What about protein? Are you going to be able to get enough?
You can get enough protein on a plant-based diet, but again, you have to be planning well. And what I recommend is that every meal and snack should have a source of protein if you're eating a plant-based diet. And, the higher protein sources would be things like soy foods, tofu, edamame, tempeh, soy milk, beans and lentils, so things like garbanzo beans, chickpeas, black beans, kidney beans, lentils, even like split peas. And then your nuts and seeds, a lot of them are high in protein, like almonds, pistachios, and peanuts. So those are some of your key sources of protein, and you want to make sure that you're including a source, at every meal and snack to make sure you're getting enough protein. And then the great thing about a plant-based diet is even whole grains are packed with protein. And vegetables, like some whole grains can have up to like 5 grams of protein in a serving. When we're talking about things like cooked farro or oats, when we're actually cooking whole grains. And then even your vegetables can throw in like 3 grams of protein.
Right.
So for a serving. So all of that is adding up too. But it's on top of that, we need to make sure we're getting a protein source at each meal. And I like to recommend at snack time too.
And it's a fabulous tip, because this way it forces you to say, okay, I'm going to have a snack. Where's the protein? I'm going to have a meal. Where's the protein? And again, I'll put up the vegetarian, my plate up so you can see what foods are in the protein group that Sharon just mentioned. But I love that tip. So every time you're going to sit down and eat, you're going to think, okay, I'm going to make sure there's a protein source. And this way you won't run out. Good job. Tell me, though, all right, so you're going to get rid of cow's milk, and you're not going to drink that or for some people who don't want to drink that. And, years ago, Sharon, you know this, the only milk alternative was soy. So you had all this dairy milk and then you had soy. Now, my goodness gracious, Sharon Palmer, I go down the milk alternative aisle here, and I'm like blinded by the amount of plant-based milk. I mean, I'm seeing almond milk, I'm seeing rice milk, I'm seeing coconut milk, I'm seeing hemp, I'm seeing pea, I'm seeing oatmeal milk. I don't know how you milk an oatmeal, but that's another episode. but what? Tell me about these, please.
Yeah, you're spot on with the plant milk. They are so popular now, and I always say, I think for every grain and nut and seed, they're making a milk out of it, and they're blending them together too.
Wow.
But soy milk, what is the original plant milk? It's been around for centuries. It originated in China. It's a traditional food there, and it's the most nutrient-rich of all the plant milks. In fact, it's almost identical to dairy milk when it's fortified. So I always recommend that as the number one plant milk, because a lot of the plant milks are not very nutrient-rich, and I'm sure you've noticed this too in your work. You can flip over the label. Sometimes they have 1 gram of protein, sometimes 0 grams of protein. Right. And if this is a regular part of your diet, I really recommend that you're having the nutrient-rich ones, at least 7 grams of protein, and a fortified one with calcium and vitamin D. So that it's really kind of taking the place of it's replacing dairy products and not just like something that tastes good.
That's really interesting because I think a lot of people don't realize that these milk alternatives or plant-based milk alternatives are not being fortified with the vitamin D and the calcium, and may not have B12 in it either. And soy milk, which was the number one replacer for ever, had all these things added. So if you want to compare a plant-based beverage, you ought to compare it to soy. And if you're not going to have the soy, then you want the oatmeal, whatever. Make sure that it's nutritionally equivalent to the soy milk when you do product comparison here. So you're getting the calcium, the vitamin D, and the B12. But what about the added sugar? Aren't some of these plant-based milks got added sugar to them?
They do. I always drink I always look for one that has no added sugar. I like the plain variety, and I get fortified. I look for fortified. I want to make sure I'm getting calcium and vitamin D in mine because I take a B12 supplement. But you're right. They can hide a lot of sugar.
Right.
So especially in these flavored ones. So that's something that you'd want to check. Read the label and see. And, soy milk is the most nutrient-rich one. But we're seeing more blended ones now. So even ones that are almond, now they're adding other ingredients to make the protein go up. So if you don't like soy milk, you can look for other ones that are more nutrient-rich, but you just have to do a little homework, read the labels. I always recommend you find one that you really like. You've read the label, you've got it picked out, and then you just automatically get that every time you go to the store, and you don't have to read the label over again. This is a regular part of your diet.
Right. Okay, good. So you find one you like that's comparable to the soy or dairy milk, and then you just keep on doing. Don't have to worry about that. That's a great idea. And you talked about the B12 supplement. Should you, if you're going to be a vegetarian, should you take a multivitamin mineral supplement every day? What do you think?
Well, it's kind of interesting because studies show that vegetarians and vegans that eat a healthy diet are actually they get more than the RDA of many vitamins and minerals. Because can you imagine all the fruits and vegetables they're eating? So some things they're getting a lot of. So a multivitamin has everything in it. So sometimes I'd rather people supplement just what they're missing,
Right.
For example, the B12, vegetarians typically get a lot of calcium. If they're getting vitamin D in their soy milk, a lot of these nutrients, it's really not so much of a concern. But sometimes people find it easy just to take the multivitamin and mineral, and then it's kind of like an insurance program. So I kind of work with people to see how they prefer doing it.
Right.
But it is interesting.
Right. It probably should be less than no more than 100% of the daily value. But I always say before you take a supplement, sit. Well, if you're going to be a vegetarian, like we started out, sit down with a registered dietitian so they can map this all out for you, and then we can see what you may need. But I like your idea of just taking spot supplements because the vitamin B12 may be low, but you're right. If you're eating a great vegetarian diet, you're going to be better than Joe and Josephine on the street that is eating a diet that has animal products, typically because there's all the wonderful plant foods that are on there. So tell me about being a vegetarian in college. Were you a vegetarian when you were in college?
I was raised in a vegetarian home. We were not 100% vegetarian. We were probably 95% vegetarian.
No
so I was
kidding.
raised in that. Yeah. So I was vegetarian in college. And actually, I went to school at Loma University, and I don't know if you're familiar with that school. I studied nutrition there, but it's been a meat-free campus for decades.
Oh my goodness!
And it's where the blue zones are. The Loma Linda is where the blue zones is the one blue zones in the United States. Which is the blue zones are locations around the world where people live the longest, and the only one in the United States is Loma Linda, and there's a high rate of vegetarianism in that community.
Wow, that is so interesting. So I bet they have some phenomenal restaurants in that place.
They do. I mean, this was old school vegetarian, classic vegetarian. And I just grew up in this environment and never really realized how special it was until I graduated and started working and realizing how, there were just all these really classic recipes that were just old-fashioned comfort food, and we just took it for granted, and it was such a healthy way of living.
That is so interesting. I'm going to put that on my bucket list of places I'm going to have to go visit. That is fascinating. So what about in today's college student? Do you think they can do it on campus?
Yeah, I think it's getting easier, and I do see, I'm sure you see this too, more and more college students, young people are interested in plant-based diet, vegetarianism, different types of plant-based diets. I think they're interested in sustainability, because there are benefits for sustainability for these diet patterns. They're interested in health, all these things. So I'm finding that it's easier and easier in colleges, and a lot of the dining services are providing options. So it's getting easier. And you can even, a lot of schools, you can talk to them about your diet preferences, and they're really eager to work with you.
Sure. I mean, I know I've seen our campus here, and it's fabulous. You can be any one of these vegetarians, and be quite happy. The food is so wonderful. I was also reading that you can actually Google colleges that are vegetarian friendly. This podcast is not only for college students and those who know a college students, but who may become a college student soon. So that's kind of interesting to Google and see, like, who's the most vegetarian friendly. I know where the one is now in California, thanks to you, but there is. I think that's really, really interesting. And what are some terrific vegetarian resources that are on the internet that students or anybody who wants to know more information about this, where can they go to besides your fabulous website, which we're going to put that up on the Spot On Facebook page, but what other resources are available?
Yeah, I mean, as you just mentioned, I have a lot of great stuff on my website at SharonPalmer.com, and it's all free and downloadable. And then one of my other ones that I recommend is Old Ways, which you're familiar with because they're located in Boston. And they have amazing programs. One of their programs is called the Vegetarian Network, the Old Ways Vegetarian Network. And they have this beautiful vegetarian diet pyramid. And you can download it, print it out, and put it on your refrigerator. But it really shows you how to plan a healthy vegetarian diet, like how much of your diet should be grains, how much should be fruits and vegetables, that kind of thing. And then another one of my favorite resources is called the Vegetarian Resource Group. Okay. And this is easy to find online. They have tons of meal plan, very science-based nutrition information. And then finally, we're members of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which is the organization that for dietitians. And they have a group called the Vegetarian Nutrition Dietetic Practice Group. And they are the group of professional vegetarian dietitians. They're experts in this field. You can find, they have a directory, so if you ever wanted to sit down with one of these dietitians in your area, they could sit down with you and make an appointment. Sometimes just one appointment is all you really need to help plan a diet, right? And they also have consumer resources like handouts you can download. So those are my favorite resources.
Okay, well, we are clearly putting a link for that on all of these up there on the Spot On Facebook page because this is great. And again, all three that Sharon Palmer here mentioned are all science-based, and these are all credible practitioners here, so what you get from them is the real deal. So we'll clearly put them up because, as we all know, not everything you pull down from the internet is accurate, and these that you mentioned are the superstars. So we'll get them up there. So Sharon, I'm telling you, I'm feeling great about this vegetarian. I'm just looking at my list here. I think I'm doing a pretty good job. That I bet I'm some kind of a vegetarian at least 6 days out of the week. I bet with the tuna with the tuna sandwiches, right? Yeah, at least. So I'm feeling good about this, and I think this information was absolutely spot on and really, really good. And we're going to link to your website. And let me tell you something. This website, there are so many things on this website that it's going to take you a day to get through it. There's recipes and all kind of fun stuff. And Sharon, you have 170,000 followers, but I think you're going to have a few more after this podcast airs. That's what I'm thinking.
That would be great. I'd love to have more people that I can work with and help eat a healthy plant-based diet.
That's good. So Sharon Palmer, we're going to send you to her website. She's the Plant-Powered Dietitian, and you just gave us some fabulous information about vegetarianism that a good incentive for us to follow, why we should do it, and maybe some things you may want to think about. So thanks again, Sharon Palmer. Thank you for listening to Spot On. I am your host, Dr. Joan Salge Blake. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Joan Salge Blake. Please subscribe to Spot On through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you find your podcasts. Also, visit our Facebook page to join the conversation and tell us what you'd like to hear in future episodes. And oh, by the way, could you ask 5 of your friends or family members to download Spot On and subscribe to it? Do I ask a lot from you?